Roger DiBattista is coming up, and he's going to speak to us about lessons in life, a teacher's story. Roger is a teacher, an educator, a mentor, an inspirational author as well. He was diagnosed with hydrocephalus as a young boy and spent most of his childhood receiving medical care and then having to persevere through many difficult and often heartbreaking challenges throughout most of his educational career. Defying the odds and predictions of his doctors throughout his life, Roger ultimately graduated high school and attended McMaster University in his hometown of Hamilton, Ontario. He ultimately received an honors BA in French and Italian studies back in 1976, and in 1977, his Bachelor's of Education and Ontario Teacher's Certificate from the Ontario Teacher Education College in Hamilton. Roger enjoyed a storied career in elementary school and elementary education for 30 years and has been an inspirational figure to his students during that time, and especially those with health and disability related barriers. So pleased to turn it over now to hear the great story and the inspiration from Roger DiBattista. Roger, go ahead. Thanks so much for your time today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Roger DiBattista, and I am a survivor of hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is defined by the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke as a condition in which the primary characteristic is excessive accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid, the clear fluid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. This excessive accumulation results in an abnormal dilation of the spaces in the brain called the ventricles. This dilation causes potentially harmful pressure on the tissues of the brain. My story begins in 1953, when my parents and my sister Leah arrived in May of that year. I was born the following July. Everything was fine for the first 3 months of my life, but then things took an ugly turn. As my head began to swell. Just imagine my parents' grief over this, having arrived in Canada, hoping to make a new life for my sister and I, and then this happened. They were new to the country and knew very little about the healthcare system. Immediately, my parents, with the help of my cousins who had been here a while and were familiar with the country, went to speak with an Italian physician, Dr. Oliveri, who referred me to a specialist, Dr. William Keith, at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. One look at me and the doctor told my parents that I needed to be hospitalized and have surgery right away, or I would not make it. My parents were devastated hearing this horrible news. At the time, there were no known treatments for hydrocephalus. However, there was an experiment that was proposed to my parents whereby they would insert a shunt to drain the fluid, the excess fluid. With my parents' permission, they performed the surgery and thankfully all went well. However, my parents were told that although the surgery was successful, I would probably have some mental or physical complications. My parents were also told not to expect much in the way of a successful education since my hydrocephalus had affected my mental capacity. In fact, my parents were also told that my lifespan would be shortened to 16 years of age at most. My parents were informed about the risks that would follow. It was extremely hard on them both. Not only would they have to cope with being new to Canada, learning the language, and confronting every other challenge faced by newcomers, but they would now have to be forced to navigate an unfamiliar healthcare system and find a way to meet my complex needs. Trips to the Hospital for Sick Children from Hamilton were not an easy task for my parents, since neither one of them drove. They had to enlist the help of relatives who had been in this country for a while to take them. Although the shunt saved my life and prevented my skull from swelling further, it was accompanied with many side effects. In those early years, I remember suffering from many migraine headaches, and I was always nauseous and vomited quite a bit. Hydrocephalus even made me sensitive to sound. Loud noises would even bother me, and often I would have to leave the room. I would have to leave and go into my room. Thus, every time I had any kind of an episode, my parents would make the trek to Toronto to be seen by the specialist. There were many times when my shunt would become blocked, and I would have to get a lumbar puncture, and then that would relieve my pain. One time in particular, when I was about 7 years of age, my shunt was blocked and my parents were in the room as I received my lumbar puncture. I remember screaming so loudly that my parents, that my dad, as strong as he was, had to leave the room because he couldn't stand to see me suffer like that. My mother, on the other hand, was a pillar of strength. She would stay right by my side and hold my hand and reassure me that all would be fine. This became the rhythm that my early years would follow. I began school in grade 1 because back then there was no junior or senior kindergarten. My elementary years were a blur, as I was in and out of the hospital for most of those years. I missed so much school that in grade 2, they promoted me, but on trial, meaning that I would have to handle the work in grade 2 by Christmas or be put back to grade 1. But I was bound and determined not to be left back. I continued to try my best in spite of my absences due to the many surgeries on my eyes, leg, and foot, all stemming from the hydrocephalus. In reference to my eyes, when I was roughly 9 years of age, my one left eye became crossed, and I had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital during the school year to correct it. Shortly after that, around the end of the school year, my left foot began to turn over. Once again, I had to go and be seen by an orthopedic surgeon by the name of Dr. Salter at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. They concluded that as a result of the hydrocephalus, I had developed a drop foot. This, of course, was no surprise to my family, as they had been told that I would eventually have some mobility issues. Once again, another surgery took place the first week of summer. I had a cast on my foot the entire summer, so I was confined to my house and backyard. My summers were never my own. While I was in school, every summer I would be in the hospital for one thing or another, whether it was for a shunt revision or for another surgery. During this time, I found ways to cope with my confinement in the hospital. I would make friends with the other kids who were in for the same reason, and we would play games, read books, and just pass the time. Once I got home, I knew I couldn't do what the other kids were doing, such as play football or baseball. So I made my own fun. I loved music. I never played an instrument, and I would joke when people would ask me if I did. I would reply, yes, I play my radio. When I was sitting on my veranda watching the other kids play on the street or sitting in my backyard, my little transistor radio was my best friend. Music kept me company. One particular summer, my parents bought me a portable record player that I set up in my backyard, and I would play music from morning until night. My sister Leah was always there for me, helping me out and making sure that I was always happy. That seemed to attract the kids in the neighborhood, and suddenly I had parties in my backyard almost every day. That was my way of coping with my not being able to do anything else. And for a little while, hydrocephalus was a thing of the past. High school became more of a challenge, a social challenge for me, as well as an academic challenge. I became very introverted in grades 9 and 10 because of my mobility. I lacked the confidence to ask girls out or even ask them to dance. I would get looks from girls as if I was weird because of my disability. In grades 11 and 12, things seemed to become a little smoother because the maturity level of the students made them accept me for who I was and not what I represented. That's what it was like back then. Today, on the other hand, there is much more acceptance of a disability thanks to the school system that has changed over the years. Furthermore, when I entered high school, because the doctors had told my parents that my mental capacity would be affected by the hydrocephalus, I was told to go into the 4-year program by the guidance counselor. I lasted 1 day. I wanted to be a teacher, and I knew that I had to take the 5-year program that led to university in order to make that dream come true. I worked hard and completed high school with decent marks, thanks to my brother-in-law, Albert, who was my math tutor for most of those years. I should mention also that I should probably share my high school diploma with him because he did help me a lot there. I was accepted to McMaster University in the fall of 1972 in the Honors French and Italian program. I seemed to excel quite well since I was studying what I loved. I also seemed to blossom socially in university as people got to know me and my personality took a turn for the better. I became more confident and outgoing and became a part of a nucleus of friends that I'm proud to call my best friends to this day. I was accepted for who I was, not for my disability, and that meant a lot to me. I graduated from McMaster University in 1976, and I was accepted to Ontario Teacher Education College, Hamilton, which was the teacher's college at the time. And I was accepted into the primary, junior, and intermediate program. I enjoyed that year immensely and graduated the following year with a Bachelor of Education. That was also the year I met my future spouse, Eveline. My first teaching job was in Owen Sound with the Bruce Gray Catholic District School Board, teaching primary French. It was difficult as it was my first time away from home. My parents and sister worried about me, but I knew I had to do this. While I was there, I became engaged to my wife, Eveline. Most people think of creative ways of proposing to their spouse, but with me, I will admit I was lonely. So I phoned her from Owen Sound and said, "Hey, what do you think if we got married next year and moved up here?" I really was shocked and surprised when she said yes. It didn't quite happen that way, however, as I decided to come back home at the end of the year because I had been offered a job teaching French with the Haldeman Board of Education, which was closer to home. We still got married in 1978, in August of 1978. And during my time in Haldeman, my beautiful daughter, Alicia, came into our lives. After spending 10 years with Haldeman, I was offered a job teaching French with the Hamilton Wentworth Catholic District School Board, where I stayed until I retired in 2007. Eveline and I are still happily married after 43 years. My daughter Alicia is now a PhD researcher in newborn screening at CHEO, which is the Children's Hospital for Eastern Ontario in Ottawa. And she is also married to a wonderful man, Peter, who is a social worker and soon to become a PhD himself in social work. I continue to teach Italian part-time at Mohawk College just to keep busy and because I love teaching. We still live in Hamilton and we have seen many changes and transformation that the city and the world have gone through over the years. They say that when you're young and you have your whole life ahead of you, that the future is also wide open. With so much time ahead of you, you never know how everything will turn out. But as I reflect now here in my 60s, looking at the years gone by and the present that I have now, I can truly say that I am living a dream life. They say that everything happens for a reason. There was a reason for me to live and overcome this adversity and to give hope to others in my situation. In life, there are roadblocks and lessons. Hydrocephalus was a major roadblock for me. However, my experiences have also taught me many things. I have learned that one must persevere and keep working hard to concentrate on the good things that life has to offer. Each day, I attempt to accept the hand that God dealt me, and this continues to make me strong. I have also learned not to give up. One should not focus on the negative, but rather on the positive. Some days are better than others, but I am working hard at it. I have always managed to live by my motto, penned by the rock group Trooper from 1977, and that is, we're only here for a good time, not a long time. So have a good time. The sun doesn't shine every day. I believe we need to seize the day because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. In spite of my limitations, I have been able to live a full life, and with the help and support of friends and family members, my life has been very satisfying and rewarding. Above all, and as always, I thank God for allowing me to forge ahead and to experience all the joys of a normal and happy life. If anyone is suffering from any kind of illness or setback, my message to you is simple. Never give up, work to your capacity, and do what you can to fulfill your life's dreams. After all, we only get to do this once. Thank you.